Now that we have the repository implementation in place, we're going to implement its dependencies, starting with the NetworkInfo class used for finding out if the device is currently connected to an active network. This part is where we will finally do test-driven development with third-party packages, which means we are going to mock third-party classes. Hello, welcome to ResoCoder, where you are getting prepared for real app development by building better, faster, more stable apps. So subscribe and hit the bell if you want to grow your coding skills. Let's jump right onto NetworkInfo. As usual, we already have the NetworkInfo contract or abstract class already done, so we can open it up and we can see that NetworkInfo implementation should have one public getter is connected. And be sure to check out the written tutorial from the link in the description, where you can also find all of the code written in this video, all of the links to different libraries, and overall go through this lesson at your own pace. Now, in the second part, I told you that we are gonna use the connectivity package to find out about the network status, and actually we already have the connectivity package imported inside pubspec YAML, so here it is. However, we are not really going to use connectivity because of some findings which I have found out. While the package is definitely useful for determining if the device is running on mobile data or on Wi-Fi, it's not that great to check for an actual internet access. As it writes actually right on the package page, note that on Android, this does not guarantee connection to internet. For instance, the app might have Wi-Fi access, but it might be a VPN or a hotel Wi-Fi with no internet access. So basically, the user could still be connected just to a local network, to LAN through Wi-Fi, and we would not be able to find out. We would still regard him as having internet access, all the while we would just get exceptions because we would still not be able to access the remote numbers API. So that's why we're not going to use connectivity, but instead we're going to use data connection checker. So here we go. This is the package which we are going to use. So actually, while we are here, let's just copy this thing, and I'm going to explain how it works in just a bit. But let's just for now replace completely the connectivity package because we are not going to use it at all with this data connection checker. This package does not rely on the underlying platform at all. It does not check if the Android device or iOS device is connected to a Wi-Fi or to a mobile network. No. What this thing does is that it opens a socket to a certain address or addresses, multiple ones, and determines the real connection status based on whether it can actually connect to some IP addresses. And also because of this, it's completely platform independent, so it's going to run even if you were doing Flutter web development. And now let's actually take a look at what the data connection checker package does. If we are going to open the dependencies tab, at least in Visual Studio Code, and go to data connection checker, open it up, and scroll somewhere, we can see here that here are the default addresses to which it tries to connect to determine if the device is connected actually to an active internet connection. And those addresses are Cloudflare, Google DNS, and also Open DNS. So let's just say that these three services combined have a 100% uptime because after all, it's Cloudflare, Google, and Open DNS. So you should not be worried regarding if the online status of the device will be truthfully determined because really these three servers here, they will always be running. Also, now that we know that we are not going to use the connectivity package, so that means we are not going to really access the underlying platform for checking connectivity, it's also wise to rename the platform folder to network. So let's just do that. And also with that, we have broken some code. So we need to go to repositories and rename platform to network. And also do the same in the test file. So let's go over to number trivia repository test, and all the way upwards, we're going to rename even this import, and now we are good to go. We've renamed the folder because it really doesn't make sense since it doesn't access any platform at all. So to implement NetworkInfo, let's first create a test file for it, again under a mirrored location, so to say. So it's going to be under core, then network, so new folder, and inside of that we're going to create a new file called NetworkInfo test.dart. And over here we again want to just import all of the usual packages. So let's go to some other test here, for example, repositories test, and let's just import Flutter test and also Mockito so that we do not need to type out those imports once again. And how will the NetworkInfo class find out about whether or not we are connected to internet? Well, it's going to have to depend on the data connection checker. So let's also import here data connection checker here, and we're going to create a mock for it because it's going to be passed into the NetworkInfo implementation as we are already used to. So class mock data connection checker, which will extend mock and implement data connection checker. And this thing will be also instantiated inside the void main. So let's create mock data connection checker. Mock data connection checker will be its name. And then let's also actually create the NetworkInfo implementation variable, which is currently, of course, not gonna be able to be imported because we have not yet created it. But let's move on. Let's continue with the setup. So in the setup, we will want to, of course, instantiate the mock data connection checker to be a new instance of it, and then pass it over to NetworkInfo implementation instance. So let's do just that. Now, in order to make these tests compile, we are going to go over to NetworkInfo, and we are now going to create a separate implementation file like we did, for example, for the repository, where we have the repository implementation in one file, which is in data, and then the contract is in another file, which is over inside the domain layer. We're now going to do that with NetworkInfo because it's really just in the data layer. But of course, because it can be used across multiple features, it's also inside the core and not inside the feature folder. But basically, we are going to create the actual implementation right below the contract. So let's create a class NetworkInfo IMPL for implementation, which will implement, of course, the NetworkInfo from above. We will need to have one override, which will be for the is connected. And finally, we're going to add a dependency so that it can be passed in this final data connection checker. So let's import it. After we call it connection checker, we should be able to import it, and surely we can. And now we're just going to create a constructor for final fields. And here we go. Now the test compiles after we import the NetworkInfo implementation, of course. Since the NetworkInfo has only one property is connected, we're going to have only one test. And this test will be really simple. It may seem that it's not necessary, but I'm going to explain why it actually is necessary and why you should test even this kind of simple functionality. So we're going to have group called isConnected, and inside the group's body, we're going to have only a single test. So let's add it. It will be the AAA test. So this isConnected property should forward the call to data connection checker that has connection. because the data connection checker actually really has connection property. So all this isConnected will do is basically nothing, because it will just get its value from calling another single property on another class. So what are we going to do here? Well, inside the range, we're going to do something very, very interesting. Of course, first we are going to set up that when the mock data connection checker, which is the dependency of our NetworkInfo class, has connection is called on that, it should answer. But what should it answer with? Well, the isConnected, as it writes here inside the test, should forward the call to data connection checkers has connection property. So how can we test if a call is only forwarded? Well, has connection is a future returning function, and this future contains a boolean. So what we would usually do here is that we would say then answer async, and we would answer with, for example, true, just for testing purposes, right? And this would return a new instance of future, which we would then be able to await. Then usually we would get the result from calling the actual NetworkInfo implementation that is connected. Actually, let's just rename this NetworkInfo IMPL to just NetworkInfo to keep it simpler. So we would call our own NetworkInfo is connected, right? And we would of course await it. This is what we would do usually. We are not gonna do it this way, but let's just follow along for a while, and then I will show you how we are actually going to do it. And then, as usual, we would verify. So verify that actually the mock data connection checkers has connection property has been called, and then we would expect that the result is true. Because of course, if the isConnected should only forward the call to data connection checkers has connection, when the has connection returns true, the result of the isConnected of our own class should be also true, right? So fair enough, that's pretty simple. Let's actually just run the test. It's going to fail again, which makes sense. And let's also implement it. So we're gonna go over here to NetworkInfo, and its implementation will be connection checker that has connection. We do not even need to create an async here and await it, because we can really just forward the call so that even the future will be the same returned. We're not going to await it here and create a new future. We can just return the same future, which comes from the has connection call. So now when we test it, it's going to pass, right? So, I mean, this is fair enough. But what we can also do here is that if we are really clever and we are really trying to break our code, we can also just call has connection, not do anything with it, and then return true, for example. Of course, wrapped inside a future. So future value would be true. And now when we run the test, it's again going to pass, because we have actually followed everything which the test has prescribed. We have called has connection, so this verification returns like it's good. Then the expected result is in fact true. So what's up with that? Well, now we have two options. We can add another test, which will test when the mock data connection checkers has connection returns false. And in such instance, our own isConnected property should also have the false to be the result. So we would need to basically just duplicate all of this test code, and that's just not cool. But the another option, what we can do is not to duplicate the test code, but to actually really check if the call is only forwarded and nothing more. We can do that by storing the returned future inside a variable. Let me show you what I mean by that, because this can be really confusing at first, but it's not going to be confusing anymore. We are going to create a final T for test, so T is just the prefix, has connection future. This will be equal to future.value true. And now what we are going to do, which is the important step here, is that we're not going to return async true from here. Instead, we're going to return or answer with t has connection future whenever the has connection property is called on the data connection checker. So we're going to answer with a future for which we have a variable which stores it. And now we're going to utilize the Dart's default referential equality for our good, because usually we want to override the referential equality with packages like equatable so that it becomes value equality. But here we are actually going to really use it for our benefit, because now we can check if the result is the t has connection future, and we're going to also remove the awaiting of the future. So the result is no longer a Boolean because we are not awaiting the future to complete. The result is now a future holding a Boolean. And this future, if the call is truly only forwarded to has connection on the data connection checker dependency, the resulting future should be the same as the future returned from the has connection property. In other words, those two futures are really just the same future, the same object, so to say, pointing to the same location inside the memory. So now what we actually cannot do is run successfully the test with what we have just created, this monstrosity over inside the implementation file, because the test will no longer pass because the future instances will not be the same, right? We're creating a new future instance which points to a different location inside the memory after all. So now really the only way which this test can use to successfully pass, or this implementation rather, to successfully do what the test prescribes, that's the better description of what we are trying to do with test-driven development, is that the isConnected should really just forward the call to has connection. And now when we run the test, it's going to pass again. All right, now you may be saying that why are we doing things like this? Why are we just hiding one call, really just one single call behind a custom class with a custom contract? Why are we not just going to plug in the data connection checker directly into the repository implementation and call it a day? Why do we need to create a NetworkInfo class? I know it may seem that this call forwarding is just a waste of effort, but it's quite the opposite, because imagine that you wanted to swap the data connection checker package for something completely different. If you use the data connection checker package classes right inside the number trivia repository here instead of the NetworkInfo, and chances are if you are building more advanced app, you will have many more repositories than just one number trivia repository. So you would basically stick this data connection checker third-party class into multiple places throughout your code base. So if you wanted to swap that package and use something different, you would need to change a lot of code, and you would also need to retest that connectivity checking code because it's contained in multiple different places, so you don't know if those tests will work again, and you would need to just change a lot of production and also test code in order to make sure that the app works as before with the data connection checker package. But if you hide the data connection checker package or whatever other package you have under a custom contract and also under a custom implementation of that contract, now if you decide that, oh, I'm not going to use data connection checker package anymore, I'm going to implement it myself, or I'm going to use completely something different, now what happens is that you have just one point at which you have to change the code should you decide to swap the data connection checker package. So that's really beneficial. To go through this tutorial at your own pace once again and to get all the code, check out the written tutorial available from the link in the description, which is going to take you to resocoder.com. And that's it for this part, because otherwise it would get too long if we try to implement other classes as well. In the next part, we are going to fully implement the local data source, for which we also have a contract already. So it will be able to get last number trivia and also cache number trivia into the cache, which will in our case be shared preferences. So if you do not want to miss that part and also more tutorials like this, definitely subscribe to this channel and also join the notification squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here on ResoCoder I am determined to provide you with the best app development tutorials and resources out there. If this video helped you with implementing the NetworkInfo class, and if you learned something new regarding how to actually check for an active internet connection, give this video a like and also share it with other developers who will surely benefit from it too. Leave a comment if you have anything to say, and see you in the next video.